The lighter clicked before the man hit the floor. That was what I remembered first. Not the gunshot, though it cracked through the east hallway hard enough to rattle the framed saints on the wall. Not the gasp one of the newer maids made behind me. Not even the streak of blood that slid over white marble in a red line so bright it looked painted there. It was the click. Clean, precise. Silver on silver. I had been changing the flowers in the front hall when shouting started near the study. Salvator men moved fast when they moved at all. That was something I had learned in the 3 weeks since Teresa Marchetti got me work at the estate. Silence, 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 and then leather soles, sharp Italian, a door opening too hard. I should have stayed in the service corridor. Teresa had told me that on my first day with the firm patience of a woman who had survived 3 bosses and 2 husbands. If the men start using that voice, Sophia, you make yourself disappear. But the vase had slipped in my hands at the first raised shout, and white lilies lay in shards around my shoes. I had crouched to gather them before someone stepped wrong and cut themselves. That was how I ended up in the hall when the stranger came out of Dante Salvator's study with a pistol in his hand and panic all over his face. He saw me. I saw him. Then Dante stepped into view behind him. I had seen Dante before, of course. Everybody in the house had. But distance changed a man like that. At breakfast, he was a dark suit at the far end of a long table, a quiet center gravity pulled toward. In the garden, he was a low voice on the phone, men shifting around him like he did not have to move for the world to rearrange itself. Here, with a gun leveled and his coat open over a black shirt, he looked less like a man and more like a decision already made. The intruder turned, fired once. A mirror burst. One of the guards cursed. Dante did not flinch. He fired back. The stranger stumbled, crashed against the wall, and slid down it, leaving a long, terrible smear. No one screamed after that. It was too late for screaming. I still had a fist full of broken glass and lily stems. One shard nicked my palm. I barely felt it. The dying man made a wet sound and tried to lift his head. Nobody moved toward him. The guards were trained for threats, not pity. The other maids had gone statue, still near the archway, their faces white. I didn't think. Thinking would have sent me running. I set the glass down on the console table, crossed the marble, and crouched beside him. "Miss," one of the guards snapped. The man's eyes were open. Not wild now, emptying, he looked young. I did the only thing I could think of that was not useless. I touched 2 fingers to his eyelids and closed them before the last breath had quite finished leaving him. "He shouldn't have to stare at the ceiling alone," I said, and my own voice sounded distant in my ears. The hallway went very still. When I looked up, Dante Salvator was watching me. He had a long face built for severity, a straight nose that had been broken at least once, and eyes so dark they seemed black until light hit them. There was blood on his knuckles. A single drop had landed at the base of his thumb and was drying there. He held a silver lighter in his left hand, the lid still open. No one in that hall frightened me the way he did. Not because he was loud, he was because he was. "Name," he said. "Sophia Bellandi." "Who hired you?" "Teresa Marchetti." He glanced toward the housekeeper, who had appeared in the doorway looking half furious and half terrified for me. "She works laundry and upstairs rooms," Teresa said quickly. "She's new." Dante looked back at me. His gaze dropped once, sharply, to the hand I had pressed against the pocket of my apron without realizing I was doing it. My stomach clenched. The folded ultrasound had been there all day, its edge a hard little corner against my hip. I had taken it from beneath my mattress that morning because I didn't trust leaving it anywhere in the servants' wing. Not with Carlos still missing. Not with the number he had written on the back before he vanished. Not with the doctor at the free clinic telling me to stop lifting heavy things when stopping was not how rent got paid. Dante stepped closer. I stood on instinct too fast. My knees nearly failed me. "What's in your pocket?" he asked. "Nothing." He looked at the dead man on the floor, then at me. That was a poor choice of word. "It's private." One of the guards breathed out something that might have been a laugh if it had not died so quickly. Dante closed the lighter with a click. "Show me." "No." His brows shifted by the smallest degree. No one said no to him in this house, probably not in most of the city. The knowledge hit me half a second too late. I should have apologized. Lied better, run. Instead, I kept my hand where it was. He came forward the last step himself, not rough. That would have been easier to understand. His fingers closed over my wrist, firm enough that I felt the heat of them through my pulse. With the other hand, he slipped into the apron pocket and drew the folded paper free. I made a sound I had never made before, small, humiliating, please. He unfolded it once, then again. The image was grainy and gray and unmistakable. For the first time since I had seen him, something moved in his face. Not softness, never that, something older, sharper, like pain recognized at a distance. How far? He asked. I stared at the image in his hand. At the curve I had traced alone in the dark so many times it no longer felt like paper. 12 weeks. Whose child? The hall tilted. Mine. His mouth almost changed shape. Not quite. That was not the question. I'm not answering that here. You're answering it now. I don't know you. That earned me the attention of every armed man in the room. Dante folded the ultrasound carefully, too carefully for someone holding that much danger in his shoulders. When he spoke, his voice was lower. I know enough. You came into my house under another man's problem and hid a secret in your uniform while one of my enemies bled on my floor. He's not your enemy to me, I said before fear could stop me. He's just dead. His gaze fixed on my face with a force that made breathing difficult. Then he held out the ultrasound between two fingers. I took it back. My hand shook. Little saint, he said quietly, looking at the fingers I had used to close a stranger's eyes. You don't get private anymore. The gates shut at dusk in a place like that. I had heard them every night from the servants' quarters, the iron drag, the lock, the finality of it. That night I heard them and knew they were closing for me. The room Teresa gave me overlooked the east wall, and a line of trimmed cypress trees, so neat they looked painted onto the dark. The bed was narrow, the wardrobe older than I was. And the bathroom tiles cracked at the corners in a way that made the whole thing feel less like a palace, and more like a place where too much had happened for beauty to matter all the time. I sat on the edge of the mattress with the ultrasound in both hands until my fingers went numb. 12 weeks. The number on the back, 1127B, stared up at me in Carlo's slanted handwriting. I had read it so many times it stopped looking like numbers and became another kind of ache. There had been no call from him in 18 days. No text. No appearance at the church where he used to meet me after my cleaning shift with coffee too sweet to drink and apology already in his smile for being late. I knew what missing meant in this city. Even girls like me knew that, but knowing a thing and saying it out loud were not the same. A knock came just after 10, not polite, rhythmic, house rhythm. When I opened the door, Nico Bellini filled the frame. He was handsome in the exhausted way of men who slept with one eye open and pretended it was a personality trait. He wore a navy suit that strained across his chest and carried a tray with a bowl of broth, a glass of water, and 6 unsalted crackers arranged like punishment. Boss's orders, he said. Soup, broth, there is a spiritual difference. I'm not hungry. Excellent, more for the garbage. He looked over my shoulder at the room as if checking for hidden assassins. You got the East Wing. Congratulations. That means Teresa likes you and the boss doesn't know yet whether to trust you or lock you in a basement. I stared. He stared back. Then he sighed and held out the tray. That was a joke, mostly. I took it. Thank you. Don't thank me. Maria made the broth. Who's Maria? He put a hand over his heart. The florist. The tragedy of my adult life. She keeps bringing me focaccia and asking if I've eaten. Do you know what that does to a man trying to stay under 20 net carbs? I blinked twice. He seemed encouraged by my confusion. Exactly, he said. No one understands my suffering. In spite of everything, a tiny laugh escaped me. His expression softened, not careless, just human. Good, he said. You still know how. Then his face changed back into something more careful. Doctor at 8 tomorrow, you'll go. No, he leaned one shoulder against the doorframe. I knew you'd say that. I lost $50. To who? To the cruel hand of optimism. He cleared his throat. Also to Teresa. I'm not seeing a doctor I didn't choose. You're carrying a child in Dante Salvator's house after he found out you lied to him. I need you to understand that your choices have become decorative. Anger came faster than fear this time, maybe because I was tired. Maybe because broth on a tray felt too normal for the kind of day I'd had. I didn't lie. You said there was nothing in your pocket. I meant nothing that belonged to him. Nico considered that seriously enough to insult me. That is annoyingly solid logic. He pushed away from the frame. Eat, sleep, don't try the windows. We have cameras, and also, more importantly, stairs. When he left, I set the tray down untouched and waited until his footsteps faded. Then I slid the ultrasound under my pillow and crossed to the window anyway. The gate lights cut white slices over the drive below. 2 guards walked the perimeter. Another smoked near the fountain, his cigarette tip a tiny red eye in the dark. I wasn't getting out that way. By midnight the house had settled into the kind of silence expensive homes have, thick, insulated, proud of itself. I lay in bed too long, then gave up and went downstairs in stockings and Teresa's borrowed cardigan, following the smell of yeast and roasted garlic to the kitchen. Teresa stood at the long butcherblock island shaping dough with hard, capable hands. You should be asleep, she said without looking up. You should too. I'm 62 and Sicilian. Sleep is for witnesses. She flicked flour at me with 2 fingers. Come help. I washed my hands and moved beside her. The kitchen calmed me, copper pans overhead, stone counters cool even in summer. The low hum of refrigerators, a radio whispering old songs in Italian from somewhere near the pantry. For 10 minutes I forgot whose house it was. Then the back door opened. Dante came in with rain on his coat shoulders and the cold still clinging to him from outside. 2 men stopped at the threshold and remained there. He didn't need to tell them to. Teresa wiped her hands. You're late. I noticed. They're sea bass. I noticed that too. Only then did he look at me. I had flour on my wrists. My braid had half escaped. The cardigan hung too loose, where my body had started changing in ways no apron could hide forever. I hated that he could see all of it. Teresa, traitor that she was, took one look between us and announced she needed Basil from the cold room. She vanished before I could protest. The silence she left behind had weight. You're awake, Dante said. So are you. His mouth almost moved. That is also true. I turned back to the dough because looking at him felt unwise. If this is about the doctor, it is. I'm not livestock. No one said you were. Then stop arranging me like furniture. He came to the opposite side of the island, not close enough to touch. Close enough that I noticed where his hands rested on the wood. Long fingers, scar over the right knuckle, clean nails. A man who could break a jaw and button a cuff with the same economy. I'm arranging security, he said. I don't need yours. That is another lie. I pressed the dough harder than necessary. You don't know anything about me. I know you were working in my house under a false silence. I know you are afraid of doctors, but not enough to skip the clinic entirely. I know the man whose child that maybe has been missing long enough for your fear to rot at the edges. His gaze flicked to the ultrasound-shaped outline. I imagined he could still see through walls. And I know you touched a dead stranger with more kindness than most people show the living. I looked up before I could stop myself. That was a mistake. His eyes were already on me. Why did you do that? He asked. I swallowed. Because no one else was going to. Something passed between us then, not trust, not anything good enough for that word. Recognition, maybe. Dangerous in its own way. He reached toward my face. I stopped breathing. His hand paused just before touching my cheek, flour suspended on the edge of almost. Then with visible effort, he changed course and took the dish towel beside me instead. There's flour, he said, too evenly. He set the towel down, stepped back. That was the first time I understood restraint could feel more intimate than touch. You'll see the doctor, he said. Or what? Or I'll carry you there myself. I should have said something brave. Sharp, memorable. Instead I heard myself ask, would you? His gaze lowered to my mouth for one forbidden second and came back up harder. Yes, he turned and left the kitchen with rain still drying on his shoulders. The door shut softly behind him. That was worse. By morning, the house had rearranged itself around me. That was the first lesson of powerful men. Once they decided your life had shifted, everyone else moved as if the shift had always been there. A different maid covered my upstairs rooms. 2 guards appeared at the end of each corridor when I worked. My phone vanished from the drawer where I had hidden it beneath stockings. When I asked Teresa, she only gave me a look that said asking was childish and pressed orange slices into my hand. The doctor came to the house instead. She was a compact woman in a gray dress with a physician's calm and enough nerve not to look impressed by armed men in the hallway. Her name was Dr. Giulia Conti. She checked my blood pressure in the blue sitting room, asked me gentle questions I only half answered, and did not tell Dante a single thing while I was in the room. Afterward, as she packed her cuff and stethoscope away, she looked at the tear in the hem of my apron where Dante had pulled the ultrasound free. "You're very tense in the hands," she said. "I work with them. No, you protect yourself with them." She nodded toward the small sewing basket tucked beside Teresa's chair. "Do you mend? All the time? Good. Keep doing that." Her gaze softened on my stomach. "And eat more than broth." That afternoon, Teresa sent me to the linen room with a basket of shirts, tablecloths, and a black suit jacket with a bullet-torn sleeve I recognized too quickly. My fingers found damaged fabric the way some people found prayer. Tiny frays, split seams, torn linings. I had been doing mending since I was 13, and my mother's employers preferred invisible repairs to paying for replacements. You learned a lot that way. What people ruined, what they hid. How a tear told the truth even when the person wearing it didn't. Dante's jacket had taken a graze at the upper arm, not enough blood to matter. Enough to ruin a suit that cost more than a month of my wages. I matched the thread, turned the seam inside out, and stitched until the wound disappeared. "You do that like you're angry at the cloth," I jerked, nearly pricking myself. Rafael Santoro stood in the doorway, suit immaculate, silver threaded through his dark hair at the temples. He was Dante's consigliere, older than the soldiers, younger than Teresa, the kind of man who made every room feel as if it were being assessed for weak points. "I didn't hear you. That concerns me more than it should." He came in, picked up the repaired sleeve, and ran a finger over the place where it had torn. "Invisible, I'm good at it. So I've heard." "From who?" "Teresa. The kitchen carries news faster than guns." He set the jacket down. "You should leave the boss's things to staff assigned to them." "I am staff assigned to laundry." "That isn't the same thing." I threaded another needle. "Then why are you here?" "To tell me where not to stand." He watched me for a beat too long. "To tell you the house has changed since you arrived." I noticed the men with earpieces. "Good, keep noticing." His voice lowered. "If Mr. Salvator keeps you here, it is because someone may come looking for you. Do not mistake protection for affection." Heat climbed my face at the shape of the warning. "I didn't. Make sure he doesn't either." He left before I could ask what that meant. The jacket sat in my lap, heavy with a life I did not understand. Later, while sorting pressed napkins for the formal dining room, I noticed one of the corridor curtains had been rehung badly. A 1/4 inch lower on the left. That didn't sound like much. In grand houses, it was enough to shout. I went still. Behind the curtain, the wall panel sat a fraction proud of the molding, as if someone had opened the narrow service passage and closed it in a hurry. I stepped back just as Dante came around the corner with 2 men behind him. He took in my face, the curtain, the panel, everything, instantly. "What?" he asked. That passage was opened. By who? I don't know. How? The hemline's wrong. One of the guards looked offended on behalf of reality. Dante crossed to the curtain, touched the lower edge and then the panel. His eyes sharpened. "Who used this hall today?" 3 names came from the men behind him. He gave orders in Italian, fast and flat. The corridor emptied in seconds. I should have gone too. Instead, I stood there with my napkins and my stupid pulse beating in my throat. You saw that from the curtain, he said. Yes, that's not normal. I looked at the cloth in my hands. Neither is shooting people in your hallway. The corner of his mouth shifted, barely. But I saw it. Fair, he said. He took the repaired jacket from the basket at my feet. His fingers paused on the sleeve I had fixed. You did this. It was torn. That wasn't the question. Yes. His thumb traced the hidden seam once, slowly enough that I became aware of my own breathing. Little saint, he said, quieter than before, what else do you see that other people miss? I should have lied. A smarter woman would have. Instead I said, when I was a girl, my mother cleaned houses where she wasn't meant to exist. If a teaspoon moved or a shirt button changed, it meant someone had been where they shouldn't. Noticing kept us from getting blamed. Something in his face tightened at the word mother. At blame, at history, I couldn't tell which. One of his men returned at a near run. Nobody on staff admits it. Nobody on staff ever does, Dante said. He looked at me once more before turning away. Stay in occupied rooms until I say otherwise. Occupied by who? Me would be safest. Before I could answer, he was gone. Dante Carlo Morti had once told him the girl laughed with her whole face and folded napkins into perfect thirds when she was nervous. Dante had dismissed it as the kind of detail men volunteered when they were halfway in love and too stupid to hide it. Now Carlo was missing, likely dead, and Sofia Belandi stood in his house with Carlo's child under her heart and a talent for finding weak seams. Dante should have moved her out the moment he saw the ultrasound. Instead, he kept hearing her say he's just dead, as if death did not deserve ownership, only witness. That was the first mistake he knew he was making. By evening, the men Dante sent through the service passage found nothing but an external lock tampered with from the garden side. Someone had tested his house. Someone already knew the maid mattered. The day ended with thunder over the city and a guard doubled on Sofia's corridor. Someone was moving. Storms changed the estate. The marble went darker. The old glass in the west wing rattled faintly in its frames. The guards got quieter, not louder, like men instinctively lowering their profiles before weather and bullets alike. By the fourth day after Dante found the ultrasound, I understood his house in pieces. The chapel off the south courtyard with its worn stone saints and expensive candles. The armory hidden behind a walnut door in the library. The terrace where Teresa took tea at 4 and pretended not to listen to phone calls drifting from the study. Nico's route between security office and garage, always quick unless Maria the florist happened to be trimming hydrangeas. That afternoon, he found me in the conservatory, carrying a crate of white roses. Do you know, he said solemnly, that about storms? He said solemnly, setting the crate down for me before I could answer. They make everyone sentimental, men confess. Women forgive things they absolutely should not. Worst of all, Maria starts baking. I looked at him. That sounds nice. That sounds like rosemary focaccia, Sophia. Rosemary focaccia is a seduction strategy with olive oil. I have goals. You work for a man who shoots people in hallways, and yet my true battle is with bread. I laughed again, and the sound startled me enough that I pressed my mouth shut. Nico's expression gentled. There she is. He glanced over his shoulder, then lowered his voice. Boss is in the chapel. My hands tightened around the rose stems. Why are you telling me? Because Teresa sent these there, and I enjoy staying employed. He lifted the crate again and jerked his chin toward the south courtyard. Come on, before I have to explain to Maria that I died in a flower-related incident. Rain struck the flagstones hard as we crossed. The courtyard smelled like wet stone and earth, the roses sweet enough to feel wrong in weather like that. Nico held his jacket over my head for half the distance and grumbled theatrically the whole way. If I catch pneumonia, put on my grave that I suffered for aesthetics. You'll live. Thank you. That's the first kind thing anyone said to me today. The chapel was dim and gold at the edges. Candles trembled before old saints. Incense lingered in the air beneath the wet cold scent we had carried in with us. Dante stood 3 pews from the altar with his back to us, black suit cut sharp as a blade, hands clasped behind him. I would have set the flowers down and gone if he had not turned at that exact second. He looked at Nico first, then at me. "Teresa sent roses," Nico said quickly, as if presenting evidence in court. I was merely the tragic mule. Dante's gaze slid to the crate. "Leave them." Nico, who had no survival death wish in spite of his mouth, did exactly that. On his way out, he bent his head toward a candle and muttered, "Dear Lord, if you're taking requests, not today. Maria just made ricotta cake." I bit the inside of my cheek. Dante's mouth moved by the smallest fraction. Nico escaped before lightning could strike him or Dante change his mind. I set the roses at the foot of the altar. Only then did I notice the small silver plaque beneath the central candle stand. Bianca Salveter and Child the Air seemed to thin. I didn't turn, but I felt Dante move behind me. The chapel carried the temperature of his silence. "I'm sorry," I said. "For what?" "For seeing that." He came to stand beside me, close enough that I felt the rain still cold in his coat. "It's a name on a plaque. It's not just that." "No," he said after a moment. "It is. I should have left it there." It was not my place to touch whatever grief had shaped him into this hard, watchful thing. Instead, I heard myself say, "Was she your wife?" His head turned. "My sister." The answer landed softly and bruised anyway. Outside, thunder rolled over the courtyard. Somewhere a door slammed. Dante's jaw tightened at the sound, not from fear, from memory. I saw it then, not the story, but the shape of it. A storm, a call too late, a room he had reached after there was no one left to save. He didn't explain, he didn't have to. I arranged the roses because my hands needed purpose, white against stone, thorned stems hidden under the lip of the brass basin. When I reached for the last bloom, Dante reached too. Our fingers brushed, that was all. Skin over skin for half a second. It felt like a line crossing. I drew back too fast. The rose snagged my thumb. A bead of blood welled. Dante caught my wrist before I could put it in my mouth like a child. His gaze dropped to the cut, to my hand in his. "Stay still," he said. It was absurd how much that did to me. He took his handkerchief from his pocket, white, monogrammed, far too fine for blood, and wrapped it around my thumb. The cloth was warm from his body. His hands were not gentle exactly. Careful was worse. When he finished, he did not let go immediately. I looked up. His eyes were on my face, dark and unreadable and suddenly much too close. The candlelight caught one thin scar at his temple, another hidden near his collar. I became aware of the sound of rain on the chapel roof, of my own breathing, of the way his thumb rested once against the pulse in my wrist before he seemed to realize it and stepped back. That was the second time he stopped. A crack split the night. The chapel window above the side aisle exploded inward. Dante moved before the glass finished falling. He hit me hard enough to knock the air from my lungs and take us both to the floor behind the pews. Another shot slammed into carved wood where my shoulder had been. I smelled cordite and old varnish and rain. "Stay down," he said, already half over me. I didn't disobey. I wasn't stupid. Men poured into the chapel from both doors. Nico among them, cursing in a way that sounded almost prayerful. The shooting ended fast. It always did around Dante. Quick orders, a body dragged over stone, someone groaning. When the silence came back, it did not feel holy anymore. Dante rolled off me only enough to check my face, my throat, my ribs, each touch fast and efficient and burning through the layers anyway. "Where? I'm fine." "Answer." "I'm fine." He looked as if he would prefer evidence to words. Then his gaze caught on something over my shoulder and went cold. Blood had soaked through the sleeve of his shirt. "You're hurt. It's a graze. Sit down." The command came out of me before I could stop it. His eyes lifted to mine. For one dangerous second, I thought he might refuse simply because I had said it that way. Then he sat on the bottom chapel step. I knelt in front of him with shaking fingers and peeled back the torn fabric. The bullet had only ripped along the outer arm, but blood ran freely over muscle and black cloth. Not deep. Enough. Nico appeared beside us, damp hair plastered to his forehead. "He'll live. Unfortunately, so will my cholesterol." Maria sent cake with the guards and now everyone's stress-eating except me. Get gauze, Dante said. Nico pointed at the bleeding arm. This is exactly why I stress-eat. He vanished toward the sacristy. I tore a strip from the lining of the flower cloth before anyone could stop me and pressed it to Dante's arm. His body went still under my hands. Sorry, I whispered. Don't apologize for pressure. I looked up. That wasn't what I meant. For the first time, something almost tender crossed his face and was gone again before I could be sure I had seen it. Nico came back with gauze, antiseptic, and a whole lecture about why bullets were terrible for morale. I cleaned Dante's arm while Nico stood guard and muttered that if Maria married someone who liked bread, he would probably have to move countries. When I finished, Dante looked from the bandage to my face. That cloth was part of the altar arrangement, he said. It was clean. That was not the point. I met his gaze. You were bleeding. Silence opened between us again, heavy, living. Then he said very quietly, Carlo Morti worked for me. My fingers stopped on the edge of the gauze. I had not said Carlo's name in this house. Dante watched the shock hit me and did not look away. He was my courier, he said. And if he involved you, he died doing it. I stared at the blood on my hands. Outside, the storm kept breaking over the city. Inside, one thing became brutally clear. Carlo had died for him. I did not sleep. The house pulsed around the storm all night, doors opening, phones ringing, men crossing corridors with violence tucked under their coats, and somewhere in the middle of it, Carlo's name stayed, lodged under my ribs like glass. By dawn, the rain had gone and left everything shining. The cypress outside my window looked sharper, almost metallic. I sat at the little writing desk with my sewing basket open and the ultrasound under my palm. Carlo worked for me. Dante had said it plainly, as if that made it easier. Memory made liars of missing men, I knew that. Once someone vanished, you could turn them into anything if you needed to survive it. Faithful, coward, victim, bastard. Carlo, in my head, had been mostly unfinished. Now he had edges again. He had always hated when I mended his cuffs for free. You make me look respectable, he used to complain, smiling while he stood with his arms out. It's bad for the brand. He bought cheap shirts and wore expensive shoes. He always checked mirrors not for his hair, but for doorways behind him. He kissed me like someone who thought tomorrow might be confiscated. I should have understood more than I did. A knock came at 8. Teresa entered before I answered, carrying coffee and a folded men's shirt with one cuff half torn off. You look terrible, she said. That's comforting. It's accurate. She set the coffee down. Mend this and bring it to the blue study when you're finished. Whose is it? Raphael's. My hands stilled on the cup. Teresa, who missed very little, noticed. What? Nothing. Liar, she peered at me. You have the face of a woman building an idea she doesn't want. I looked at the shirt. The cuff had torn where it joined the sleeve. Not from where, from being yanked on something sharp. I just want to work, I said. That ended the day, mister. Salvator said little saint in that tone. Heat went up my throat. He doesn't. Teresa lifted one brow so high it nearly disappeared into her hairline. Please, I raised sons. I know when a man is already in trouble. After she left, I took the shirt to the window for better light. The fabric was good, hand-finished, custom. But the inner seam had been resewn recently with a thread just slightly darker than the original. Not enough for most eyes, plenty for mine. I opened the cuff carefully. Inside, hidden between the turned layers, was a strip of paper no wider than my finger. I stared at it for a long second before sliding it free. Bank numbers, transfer dates, initials. 3 offshore accounts I knew enough not to understand, and one line that chilled me anyway. Be safehouse/release locations/R approved. My pulse went strange. Bianca, safehouse, Raphael. The room felt suddenly too small. I folded the paper into my fist and walked straight to the blue study without finishing the repair. 2 guards looked at my face and let me through without question. Dante stood at the far window in shirt sleeves, phone in hand, Nico near the drinks cart, and Raphael seated on the leather sofa reviewing documents as calmly as a man waiting for lunch. Every nerve in my body misfired at once. "I need to speak to you," I said. 3 heads lifted. Dante took one look at me and ended his call. "Now, alone," Raphael smiled faintly. "That's bold. It's urgent." Dante crossed the room, took my elbow, and steered me through the inner door to his private office. He shut it behind us. "What happened?" I opened my hand. His gaze dropped to the strip of paper, hardened, lifted to my face again. "Where?" "In Raphael's cuff." The silence that followed felt surgical. "Show me." I did, every detail, the darker thread. The Rasoon cuff, the tucked strip. My voice shook only once on Bianca's name. Dante did not interrupt. He took the paper when I was done and read it twice. Then he set it on his desk with infuriating care. "You were right about the curtain," he said. "That is not the part you should be focusing on." His mouth almost changed. "No." "It is." I stepped closer before caution could catch me. "Did he know where she was?" Dante looked at the paper and nodded at me. "I don't know yet." "Yes, you do." That got his eyes back on mine. "It is not a kindness," he said quietly, "to ask me for conclusions before I can afford them." "What did Carlo put me in the middle of?" His jaw tightened. "Something he hoped you would survive." The answer infuriated me because it sounded like truth and evasion at once. "He should have told me. He was trying to keep you alive. So is everyone in this house." "It feels a lot like prison." Dante moved then, one step only, but enough to put the desk at my back and his body between me and the rest of the world. Not touching, not quite. "I can send you away," he said. "Today. With money, documents, medical care, and a name no one can trace." The offer landed like a slap because some part of me had wanted it, and some uglier part had wanted him to refuse it. "And if I go, you live. And if I stay," his gaze dropped once to my stomach, rose slowly. "You become part of a war." I hated that tears came then, not because I was weak, but because I was so tired of being rearranged by men carrying danger as if it were a profession. "I didn't ask for any of this." "No," his voice roughened on the single word. "You didn't." I looked away first. On the small table near his shelves lay a square of cream linen. Delicate hand stitching marked the edges. Half a baby blanket. I had started it after midnight because my hands needed proof they could still make something that was not damage control. The top layer was plain, the underside soft blue, strong outside. Tender hidden. Dante followed my gaze. "You made that." "It's nothing." "It's not." I swallowed. I didn't know what else to do. For one impossible second, he looked less like a mafia boss and more like a man standing too close to a memory. He reached toward my face again. My whole body went still. This time his knuckles brushed the wet track under my eye, once, so lightly I might have imagined it. Then he dropped his hand. That was the third time he stopped. A knock split the room. Nico stepped in without waiting, face stripped of humor. "We have a problem." Dante turned. Nico's eyes flicked to me, then back to him. "One of the transfers on that paper just moved. 10 minutes ago. Someone knew we found it." Dante's expression went hard enough to change the air pressure. He looked at the office door as if he could already see through it to the man sitting in the outer room. "I want him watched," he said. "He already is. No mistakes." Nico nodded and went. I wrapped my arms around myself. "So it's him." Dante picked up the strip of paper again. "It's someone close enough to smell the smoke before the fire starts." From the other room came the soft scrape of a chair moving. I thought of Raphael's warning in the linen room. Do not mistake protection for affection. He had not been warning me about Dante. He had been measuring how dangerous it would be if Dante cared anyway. By evening, the study windows reflected armed men in every dark pane. No one said the word traitor. No one had to. Dante moved me before sunset, not to another wing, off the estate entirely. Nico drove. 2 SUVs followed. I sat in the back with my overnight bag and the half-finished baby blanket tucked inside it, trying not to look at the city as if I might be seeing it for the last time in the shape I knew. The safe house was not what I expected. No concrete bunker, no underground vault. It was a brownstone on a quiet street in Brooklyn with trimmed hedges, old iron railings. and lace curtains that would have looked harmless if there had not been armed men in the neighboring doorway pretending to read newspapers. Inside, it smelled like lemon polish, gun oil, and winter wool stored too long in cedar. Nico carried my bag upstairs. "Best room's yours," he announced. "Second best room is the boss's. Third best is mine, though frankly I feel my contributions are under-recognized." "Thank you," I said, because he had taken the heavier bag without making me ask. He waved a hand. "If Maria ever loves me back, I will leverage all of this into a story about my character." "Does she know you're in love with her?" He looked wounded. "Sophia, I'm Italian. Of course she knows. The point is that she must suffer aesthetically before she says yes." Before I could answer, Dante came in from the front room with his phone in one hand and that silver lighter in the other. Click. "Shut, click, shut." He did it when he was thinking. "Windows stay latched after dark," he said to me. "You don't answer the door. If you need something, you call Nico or Teresa. Teresa's here. She will be." "Why?" "Because she threatened to set my car on fire if I moved you without someone you trusted." That surprised a laugh out of me. Dante's eyes lifted to my face at the sound, held, moved away. "I'm going out," he said. "No," the word came before reason. Both men looked at me. I stood in the narrow hall with my hand still on the stair rail, pulse tripping over itself. "You think Raphael's moving money. You think someone tried to kill us in a chapel. And you're going out." His gaze sharpened on the fear I had failed to hide. "It's necessary. That doesn't make it smart." Nico's mouth twitched. He vanished graciously toward the kitchen, either to save me or himself. Dante took one step closer. "Little Saint." The nickname landed differently now, not colder, worse, softer around the edges. "I don't need you to agree," he said. "No," I whispered. "You just expect me to stay here and wait." "Yes." I hated that my eyes burned, hated more that he noticed. He looked at me for a long second, then did something so unexpected it left me unable to move. He set the silver lighter in my palm. "If I'm not back by midnight," he said, closing my fingers around it, "Nico takes you to Teresa's cousin in Boston. You use the documents in the red envelope in the kitchen drawer, and you don't look back." The metal was warm from his hand. "Dante," he stepped away before I could say anything more dangerous than his name. The attack came at 11:37. I knew because I had been staring at the clock on the mantel, willing it toward midnight, the lighter heavy in my cardigan pocket. Nico was on the floor with a laptop muttering about security camera blind spots and whether Maria would respect him less if he ate emergency biscotti. The front windows exploded inward. After that, time turned into pieces. Glass, shouting, Nico shoving me down behind the sofa, gunfire from the hall, someone trying the back door, the baby blanket slipping from my lap onto the floor. Dante came through the smoke like fury in a black coat. I had never seen a human body move the way his did when it believed one thing mattered. Efficient, merciless. Terrifying in its lack of wasted motion. He dropped one man before the intruder fully cleared the doorway, drove another into the wall hard enough to crack plaster, and took a knife across his side that he seemed not to feel at all. One of the gunmen reached the sofa. I did the stupidest brave thing I had ever done. I struck him across the face with Dante's silver lighter. The sound it made against bone sickened me. The distraction bought Nico enough time to put a bullet in the man's shoulder. Then Dante was there in front of me, between me and everything else. "Are you hit?" "I know." He scanned me anyway. Face, throat, chest, belly, fast, frantic beneath the control. Blood darkened his shirt at the ribs. "You're bleeding." "Not mine." It was a lie, a bad one. When the last intruder was dragged out and the street went sirenless again, because men like Dante did not call police when their wars spilled over, the house fell into a silence that trembled. Around the edges, Nico vanished to secure the perimeter. Teresa arrived swearing in dialect sharp enough to cut stone. Dante went upstairs and locked himself in the bathroom. I waited 30 seconds. Then I ignored the lock and used Teresa's hairpin. He was leaning one hand against the sink when I stepped in, shirt half open, blood definite now. The knife had carved a shallow but ugly line across his side. His eyes lifted to mine in the mirror. "Leave." "No." He made a soft sound that was almost disbelief. "You're developing a habit. You got cut. So sit down." He turned then, slow and dangerous and exhausted enough that the truth showed through the cracks. "You should be afraid of me after tonight." My throat tightened. "I am." Something shuddered in his face. I stepped farther into the room anyway. "Not in the way you mean." He stared at me for one long beat. Then he sat on the closed toilet lid like a man conceding not to me, but to blood loss. I cleaned the cut. My hands shook only once, when I touched the hard plane of his abdomen and felt him tense under my palm. The bathroom smelled like antiseptic, steam, and the colder scent that seemed to belong to him even when he had been indoors too long. "You hit a man with my lighter," he said after a while. I noticed. That was not a recommendation. "You were busy." His mouth moved, not a smile, the memory of one. When I finished taping the dressing in place, I looked up. He was already looking at me. Too close, too tired, too full of things neither of us knew how to survive elegantly. "This is the part," I said, my voice barely there, "where I should say something sensible. You could try." "I don't think I can." He lifted one hand, stopped it halfway to my face, the fourth stop. I caught his wrist. That was my mistake, or my choice, I still don't know. His gaze dropped to my fingers curled around him, rose again, darker now. "You should let go," he said, and the strain in his voice made my skin go hot. "I know." I didn't, neither did he. When he kissed me, it was not rough. That would have been simpler. It was careful and hungry, and held back even while it happened, as if some part of him was still bracing against himself. I kissed him back because I had already lost that particular argument somewhere around the chapel floor. He drew away first, forehead against mine, breathing hard once, then mastering it. "Little saint," he said to the dark between us, "it was the way you touched a dead man like he still deserved gentleness." The words went through me. That was it, the thing. The reason that had been stalking us since the marble hall. I closed my eyes because I could not bear how much it cost to hear it. Downstairs, a door slammed. Nico shouted for more men. War had found the house. Morning brought casualties, not numbers first, names, 2 guards from the outer car, 1 driver. Maria's younger brother Paolo, who did deliveries for the flower shop on weekends, and had been in the wrong car behind Nico when the second attack came at dawn. Nico told me that with his left arm in a sling, and a bruise climbing his jaw like spilled ink. He said it leaning against the kitchen counter while Teresa stirred espresso hard enough to punish the spoon. "He was 19, Nico said. No one answered. Maria arrived 20 minutes later with dirt still on the hem of her coat, and a face so white I thought for one horrible second she had already heard her brother was dead. Then I understood. She had heard. That was the face hearing Maid. Nico crossed the room toward her without any of his usual speeches. Maria hit his good shoulder with both fists before she sagged against him. "You promised you would keep him away from this," she said into his shirt. Nico's voice broke on the answer. "I know." That was how grief entered the room, not with screaming. With a woman holding on to the wrong man because the right one was gone. By noon, the safe house no longer felt temporary. Men came and went with ammunition cases. Phones rang nonstop. Dante had 3 meetings in 3 separate rooms and said fewer words with each hour. I spent mine in the back bedroom finishing the baby blanket because stopping felt like drowning. Plain cream linen on top, soft blue underneath, hidden seams so small they vanished, protection looking like quiet. Teresa came in while I was tying the last knot. "You made a choice yet?" she asked. "About what?" She set a set of car keys and a folded packet of documents on the bed beside me. "Boston, my cousin. You leave tonight, you disappear before anyone notices which road you took." I looked at the keys, at the packet, at the whole possible life lying there in paper form. I thought Dante wanted me here. Dante wants many things. Safety is not the same as selfishness, though God knows men like him confuse them. She folded her arms. "The question is what you want." I laughed once, ugly and tired. I wanted a tiny apartment with bad plumbing and enough peace to learn how to be somebody's mother. And now, I looked down at the blanket in my hands. And now there was a man downstairs bleeding through expensive shirts and pretending he could still make war without it touching me. There was Maria crying into Nico's coat. There was Paolo dead because people who mattered to Dante became targets by proximity alone. Now, I knew exactly what his world cost. Dante found me before dusk. He filled the doorway and saw the keys immediately. Of course he did. Teresa, he said, without taking his eyes off me, likes to interfere. She likes me alive. So do I. The words landed between us with more force than if he had shouted. I rose too quickly, blanket slipping from my lap. Alive where, hidden under another name while men die because of me. Because of me. That's not better. No, he said. It is. He came in and shut the door behind him, not locked, never locked with me. That should not have mattered. It did. I can get you out tonight, he said. You and the baby, money. Medical care, no one follows. And you. His face went still in that way I had come to fear. I finish what started. It should have been enough to hear he was willing to let me go. Maybe in some healthier life it would have been. Instead it felt like being cut loose. What am I to you? I asked, and hated myself the second it left my mouth. He looked at the blanket on the bed. Then at me, not something I say aloud if I want you safe. The answer was so unfair it took all the air from the room. I turned away because if I looked at him any longer I would choose badly while he watched. He did not touch me. He left. That hurt more than touch would have. Teresa drove me to the station at 9 with the documents in my bag and the blanket folded on top of them. Dante did not come down to say goodbye. Nico, pale and furious with painkillers, hugged me one-armed and told me if Boston had bad coffee he would personally sue the state. Maria pressed a paper bag into my hands. For the train, inside were 2 pieces of focaccia and an orange. Nico made a tragic sound. Even in farewell she torments me. I almost smiled. The station smelled like wet newspapers and metal brakes. My train was on track 11. I stood beneath the board while Teresa bought my ticket with cash, and all I could think was that leaving felt too much like being erased before I had decided who I was. The call came over the loudspeaker. Boarding. This was real, possible, open. I took one step toward the platform, then my hand brushed the pocket of my coat. The silver lighter was still there. I had forgotten to give it back. No, that wasn't true. I had kept it. I pulled it out and stared at the scratched silver surface, at the small dent near the hinge from where I had hit a man in the face to save Dante's life. My thumb opened it. Click. In the bright station noise, that clean sound sliced straight through me. I saw the chapel plaque. Bianca Salvetter and child. I saw Maria collapsing into Nico because Paolo would not ever come home. I saw the way Dante had said not something I say aloud if I want you safe. Leaving was possible. That was the worst part. No locked door, no chains, no command, just a train. If I boarded it, I would live. My child would live. We would have a small apartment somewhere with thin walls and ordinary fear. I would teach myself not to listen for that lighter, not to wonder who had bled because I chose my own peace. If I stayed, I was choosing the darkness with open eyes. I looked at Teresa. She looked back, old and wise and unbearably gentle. I won't stop you either way. The train doors opened, then closed. I turned around. By the time we got back to the safe house, I knew the cost of it. The papers in my bag no longer belonged to me. The future they offered didn't either. I walked in under the stare of armed men and found Dante in the dining room over a map spread with names and routes and blood. He looked up when I entered. Not surprise. Worse. Relief so sharp it almost looked like pain. I took the Boston documents from my bag and set them on the table between us. Then I put his lighter beside them. I'm staying, I said. His gaze moved from the lighter to my face. Sophia, I know what this is now. My voice shook. I made it stand anyway. And I'm still here. Nico, in the doorway behind him, muttered softly, well. We're all doomed. No one corrected him. Dante closed his hand over the lighter. Something final passed across his face. The war was no longer happening around me. I had walked into it myself. The mistake that cost us came from me. I wish it had been nobler than that. Smarter. Some complicated trap nobody could have predicted. It was only hope wearing the wrong shoes. The call came a little after midnight to the kitchen phone, while Nico was upstairs arguing with a doctor about whether one man could survive on espresso and revenge. Teresa had gone home under escort to rest. Dante was in the basement war room with Raphael and 3 capos, voices low over maps. I answered because no one else was there. Sophia, for one irrational second my heart stopped and started in the shape of Carlo. The voice was rougher than I remembered, tired, hurried, but his. "I don't have long," he said. "Listen to me." Every sensible thought I owned should have ended the call right there. Men do not return from 18 days missing with perfect timing and no explanation. Ghosts especially shouldn't know the kitchen extension. Instead, I gripped the receiver so hard my fingers cramped. "Carlo, they know about the paper, don't they? I told you not to trust anyone in that house." The words hit every fear I had been feeding in secret. "Where are you?" "Near, not safe. I need the number from the ultrasound back, Sophia." "He'll kill me if he gets it." He, not who. That should have been enough to stop me, but grief is greedy. It will eat reason for one more chance at a voice. "I don't have it anymore," I whispered. "Then come alone, service entrance, 5 minutes." The line went dead. I stood there with the receiver in my hand and my whole body ringing wrong. I should have gone to Dante. I should have gone to Nico. I should have done almost anything else. Instead, I slipped through the rear corridor with my coat over my nightdress and the lighter in my pocket because it had become, somehow, the object my hand sought when I was afraid. The service entrance opened to a narrow alley running beside the brownstone. Garbage bins, wet brick, one flickering light over a steel door. No Carlo. I had time to realize that. Then a cloth came over my mouth from behind. I fought badly and hard. Elbows, nails, heel of my hand. The world tilted black at the edges anyway, and the last thing I heard before everything blurred was a voice I recognized too late. "Careful," Raphael Santoro said. "She's carrying a future." When I woke, the air was cold and full of old stone. Wine cellar, not the safe house, the estate. I knew it by the smell, earth, cork, age, and by the iron-bound door with its ornamental crossbars. My wrists were tied in front of me to a heavy tasting chair. A lantern burned on the barrel beside me. No windows, only dark racks rising into darker shadows. Raphael stood across from me with his coat off and his sleeves rolled neatly to the forearm. He looked less like a monster than most monsters should. That made him worse. "You were easier than I hoped," he said. I swallowed against the sour cloth taste still clinging to my throat. "Carlo's dead." "Yes." The single syllable almost undid me. He watched it happen and did not look away. "He was loyal, inconveniently. You killed him. I arranged necessity." He tilted his head. "Do not pretend surprise. You live among killers now." Anger got where grief couldn't. "And Dante trusted you." A flicker there, gone fast. "Dante trusts ghosts," he said. "I taught him that." My heart beat so hard it hurt. He paced once between the barrels, hands clasped behind him the way Dante often stood. Mirror, distortion. A man wearing the shape of discipline without any of its mercy. "I knew his father," he said. "I carried that family before Dante's hands were steady enough for a gun." I watched what love did to this house, first his mother, then Bianca. He looked at me then, finally sharp. "A child under a woman's heart is not innocence in our world. It is leverage, weakness. A loaded weapon pointed at the man who cares. You let Bianca die." He took the accusation like weather. "I gave up one safe house to prevent a war that would have killed 20 more. The quiet certainty in his voice turned my stomach. "She was his sister. She was an error in timing." His expression hardened for the first time. "And now you are." The room seemed to narrow around us. He came closer, crouched, and untied one of my wrists only to take the ultrasound from my coat pocket where I had stupidly hidden it again. He turned it over, tracing the faded number on the back. "Carlo was sentimental," he said. "He thought you would hide what mattered." "I did, And you brought it to Dante. I brought it to the truth. That made him smile, not kindly. No. You brought it to the same disease under a prettier name. When he stood, a small object slipped from his sleeve cuff and hit the floor near my shoe. A sewing pin. Long, steel, sharp. I did not look at it. If he saw me see it, I was done. Dante will come, I said. Yes. Raffles' face went distant in a way that made me understand he had been waiting for that more than for any money. And when he does, he will choose. The family or you. If he chooses you, he proves I was right. If he chooses the family, he becomes what I made him for. That was the mirror, not power, philosophy. The door opened behind him. One of the men murmured something about perimeter movement. Raphael nodded and turned to leave. At the threshold, he paused. You know what unsettled him about you? My pulse stumbled. You made death look like something still worth being gentle to, he said. Men like Dante don't survive that kind of reminder. After he left, I bent forward inch by inch until my fingers touched the pin on the floor. It took me 7 full minutes to get it into my tied hands. My wrists were bleeding by the time the first knot loosened. Above me, the house groaned under running feet and shouted orders. Dante was coming. I only prayed he wasn't already too late. I got one hand free. It sounds small now. It was. My fingers had gone numb from the ropes. Blood made the pin slippery. Twice I dropped it and had to fight panic down before it became noise. The lantern hissed on the barrel beside me. Somewhere overhead a door slammed so hard dust sifted from the stone ceiling. I saw it at the second knot and thought about absurd things because fear can't hold one shape forever. The baby blanket left folded on the back bedroom chair. Teresa's coffee too strong for any human heart. Nico telling Maria that grief was not a reason to skip meals and Maria throwing a dinner roll at his head. The second knot gave. I pulled my hands free so fast the chair tipped. Pain shot up both arms. I bit back the cry and hit the floor hard enough to rattle my teeth. The wine cellar door was still locked. Of course it was. But old estate doors had old estate habits. The keyhole was huge. The hinges were exposed. The lower panel had warped a little over time, leaving a breath of space between wood and threshold. That was enough for women like my mother to notice. Enough for girls like me to learn. Enough. I dragged myself to the base of the door and used the steel pin to worry at the bottom hinge plate. It took too long, too much trembling. The screws weren't screws at all, but old hand-forged pegs. I could move one if I levered it with the chair leg. I broke the chair for the leg. The crack echoed in the cellar. Footsteps answered from the corridor. No more careful. I jammed the pin into the first peg, forced the chair leg beneath it, and pulled with everything in me. The peg shifted, 1/2 inch, enough for the hinge strap to sag. The footsteps stopped outside. A shadow cut under the door. I grabbed the lantern and stepped back just as the lock turned. The first man threw took hot oil and flame to the face. He screamed, stumbled, and gave me exactly the opening I needed. I drove the broken chair leg into his knee and ran. Pregnant women are not supposed to run through underground service corridors in borrowed slippers with soot on their hands. There are many things women are not supposed to do. I did not find that particularly useful in the moment. The estate cellar maze opened into the old pantry passage behind the banquet hall. I knew it because I had polished those shelves twice and hated every inch of them. Men shouted behind me. One gunshot splintered plaster near my shoulder. I turned left, then right, taking servant routes no soldier bothered to learn because men with guns rarely imagined they might need the maps of women who changed sheets. The corridor ahead burst open with light. Dante came through it at speed. For a stupid, impossible second, I thought I had imagined him, coat open, shirt dark at the collar, pistol in one hand. Silver lighter flashing in the other, as if he had forgotten it was still in my pocket, and carried a second one in rage alone. Then he saw me, everything in his face changed. Sophia! I had been holding myself together with splinters. His voice took the nails out. He caught me before my knees actually failed, and one arm locked around me so hard I felt the truth of him in it. Not possession. Terror after the fact. You're bleeding, he said against my hair. Mostly wrists. His hand went to the rope's marks, stilled, then moved over my arms, my ribs, my belly with a shaking thoroughness more intimate than anything we had done in the bathroom. I got out, I heard myself say. I don't know why that was the thing I needed him to know first. His forehead touched mine once, briefly, rough with relief. I know. Men crashed into the far end of the corridor. The reunion ended. Dante shifted me behind him with one hand and started firing with the other. Nico appeared from a side passage, swearing so creatively I would have laughed in another life. "There you are," he panted, winged arms strapped tight against his body. "Do you know what Maria will do to me if I come back without you? She will turn my funeral into performance art." "You're injured," I said stupidly. "And yet," he replied, putting a bullet through the light over one attacker's head, "still gorgeous." We moved fast after that. Dante didn't let me out of reach. One hand on my back, my wrist, the inside of my elbow, always finding me in the dark, always moving me before danger fully took shape. It should have made me feel trapped. It didn't. It made me feel seen in a way I had never survived before. In the main hall, the war had finally stopped pretending to be private. Two of Raffles' men were down near the stairs. One of Dante's capos bled through his jacket into the parquet. Teresa stood at the end of the corridor with a shotgun and murder in her old Sicilian eyes. "About time," she snapped when she saw me. "I'm too old for kidnappings." I nearly cried from gratitude. Dante pushed me behind the carved banister and dropped to one knee in front of me for the first time since I had known him. "Listen," he said, "no wasted words. Never. There's a tunnel from the pantry stairs to the garden crypt. Nico takes you, if I'm not there in 10 minutes. No," his eyes cut up to mine. The old fear that I was only ever decorative rose in me like bile and died, just as fast. I grabbed his coat front before I could rethink it. "I am done being moved like luggage," I said, breathless and furious and too close to tears. "Raphael said he wants you to choose." "Then don't let him choose for either of us." A strange stillness came over Dante's face, not calm, something more dangerous. He looked at the soot on my hands, the rope burns, the fact that I had escaped before he arrived. Then he reached into his coat and handed me a small matte black phone. "One button," he said. "Calls only me and Nico," I stared. "If you see a seam that doesn't belong, you tell me before anyone breathes near it." It was the closest thing to trust he had ever spoken directly. I nodded once. He stood. Across the shattered hall, Rafael Santoro stepped into view at the top of the staircase, immaculate even now, a gun low in his hand, an old betrayal wearing my favorite form of composure. Dante went very still beside me. "I raised you better than this," Rafael called. Dante's answer was almost quiet. "No, you raised me for this." Every man in the hall understood something had ended. Whether any of us would survive the ending was still open. The family crypt sat behind the chapel under a stand of dark yews, as if the dead needed privacy from the living even here. I knew the path because Teresa had once shown me the root gardeners used with fresh flowers on feast days. Stone slab, iron gate, steps slick with moss. A place built to remember and conceal in equal measure. That was where Raphael ran. Of course it was. He had made himself the keeper of Salvator grief for too long to pick any other battlefield. Dante moved through the garden like a blade. Nico went left with 2 men despite his arm and Teresa's threats. I followed because the black phone in my pocket had become permission and because I had already chosen this. Rain started again, fine and cold. The chapel bells struck once in the wind as if the house itself objected. We reached the crypt gate just as one of Raphael's men dragged a crate through the doorway below. Heavy, metal corners. I saw the cable first. Black wire, too new, running under the left hinge plate where old stone should have shone clean. "Dante," he stopped on the top step at the tone in my voice. I pointed. "The hinge," Raphael's man turned. Nico shot him through the shoulder before he could touch whatever detonator he carried. Dante's head snapped to the wire to me, back to the door. Everything compressed into one hard second. "Fall back," he barked. Men scattered down the path. Dante lunged forward anyway, not back. yanked the dead man's body clear of the threshold, and kicked the crate sideways just as the first charge blew. The crypt door erupted inward with a blast of stone and dust. The shock wave hit my chest like a giant fist. I went down to one knee. Teresa swore loud enough to wake saints. When the smoke thinned, Dante was still standing, changed by dust, by blood, by certainty. We went in. The lower chamber was lit by emergency lamps clipped hastily to old shelves. Coffins lined the walls in polished niches. In the center, near Bianca's marble slab, Raphael waited with his gun drawn and his suit speckled gray from the blast. He looked tired. That was somehow worse than furious. It was always going to end here, he said. Dante advanced one step. You used her grave. I used your weakness. My sister. Your failure, Raphael snapped back, the first crack in his control. You think I don't know what she was to you? I was there when your father chose business over blood. I was there when you learned crying doesn't buy back the dead. So you sold her location. Raphael's face went flat. I prevented a civil war. You murdered a pregnant woman. I preserved the family. The words echoed off stone and old names. I understood then that he truly believed it, not as excuse, as creed. The family above all, love beneath usefulness, tenderness a tax only fools paid. That was the man Dante could have become if he had let every wound calcify into doctrine. Dante raised his gun. Don't, I said. Both men looked at me. I don't know if I spoke because I wanted to spare Raphael or Dante. Maybe both, maybe neither. Maybe I only wanted the moment to stop being what it was. If you kill him like this, I said to Dante, my voice shaking under the crypt lights, he wins twice. Raphael laughed softly. Listen to her. She thinks murder needs mood. Dante didn't look away from him. Sophia, back. No, Raphael's gaze sharpened. There it is, the disease. He lifted his gun toward me. Dante fired first. The shot hit Raphael low, through the side. Not killing. Dropping. A choice, not a reflex. Raphael sank against Bianca's slab with a sound that seemed dragged out of years instead of his body. He looked at the blood spreading through his shirt as if mildly offended by its timing. You hesitated, he told Dante. For her, Dante said. Raphael's smile was terrible. Exactly. Then he moved faster than pain should have allowed, dragging a second pistol from the back of his waistband and firing blind. I had time to see the muzzle flash. Nico shoved me sideways with his good shoulder. The bullet meant for my chest tore into his already injured arm and spun him into Teresa, who caught him with language that should have shattered the crypt glass if there had been any. Everything after that happened too quickly and too slowly at once. Dante crossed the chamber and took Raphael's gun hand apart with one brutal strike. The second shot went into stone. The third never came. Dante looked down at the man who had raised him, trained him, maybe loved him in the broken way men like that still could. Then he put one bullet through Raphael Santoro's heart. No speech, no forgiveness, no grandeur, just the end of a philosophy. The chamber went silent, except for Nico hissing obscenities through his teeth, while Teresa bandaged him with a handkerchief and insults. Raphael died with his eyes open. Dante stared at him for a long second. Then I saw it not triumph, not relief, loss, he had won. It had cost him the closest thing he had ever had to a second father, and maybe the last belief that his family had been built on anything but a series of beautiful excuses for blood. I stepped toward him carefully, over debris and dust. He didn't turn until I touched his sleeve. Only then did he look at me. The darkness in his face had changed shape. Not gone, never that. But altered by something he could not undo. Behind us, Nico let out a dramatic groan. If Maria sees this much blood on my shirt, she'll think I died handsome. Teresa slapped the back of his head. Be grateful you're too stupid to die. He looked at me around the pain and managed, see, this is why I stay thin, easier to bandage. I laughed once and cried on the same breath. Dante's hand came to the back of my neck, not claiming, anchoring. Outside, rain washed dust from the chapel stones. Sirens stayed absent. Men carried out the bodies of the loyal and the traitorous alike. Paolo and Bianca, and every cost before them, crowded the night, whether we spoke their names or not. At dawn, when the last gun was unloaded and the last order given, Dante stood beside me in the wet garden and looked at the crypt door hanging broken on one hinge. His voice, when it came, was stripped bare. "It is over. War leaves paperwork." That felt obscene, but it was true. 3 weeks after the crypt, I sat at Dante's kitchen table. His actual kitchen now, not Teresa's dominion at the estate, while 2 lawyers in expensive charcoal suits explained trust structures, property shields, medical provisions, and the exact wording needed to make sure a child not born into his blood would never be vulnerable to challenges from men who treated inheritance like sport. I stirred tea, I wasn't drinking, and watched sunlight move across the wood grain. Dante said almost nothing. He listened, corrected one clause, and slid every paper toward me before he signed anything himself. "That line," he said, touching paragraph 4 with one finger. "Change surviving issue to child, singular or plural, by present or future birth. I won't leave gaps." The younger lawyer blinked and corrected it immediately. After they left, the house exhaled. This place was smaller than the estate. A townhouse on a side street in Brooklyn with 1 guard out front, a walled back garden, and floors that creaked in winter. Teresa called it Dante's civilized den. Maria had redone the window boxes herself. Nico visited almost daily, partly because his arm still ached in bad weather, and partly because Maria had decided recovery required feeding him focaccia until he surrendered to carbohydrates and, ideally, to her. He was downstairs in the little garden when Maria arrived that afternoon carrying tomatoes, and a suspicion he was milking the sling for sympathy. "I am a wounded public servant," he informed her through the open window. "You are dramatic," she replied. "These are not contradictory." From somewhere deeper in the garden, Teresa muttered, "Marry him or shoot him, Maria." "I'm tired." The sound of them moved through the house like proof life could return without apologizing for itself. I sat back from the table and pressed a hand to the roundness beneath my dress. The baby shifted, not a kick exactly, more a decided turn. I still froze every time it happened. Dante came in from the front hall removing his cuffs. He had stopped bleeding through shirts. Mostly. The cut at his ribs was healing, the darker thing under his skin slower. He saw my hand over my stomach and crossed to me without comment. "Again?" he asked. I nodded. His palm hovered once over the curve, asking without words. When I took his wrist and placed his hand there, something quiet moved in his face. The baby shifted again beneath both our hands. Dante went utterly still. I looked up. He was staring at the place where our child knot his moved under my skin as if violence had never prepared him for that kind of powerlessness. "Terrifying," he said. I laughed softly. "A little. Not the baby." His eyes came to mine, stayed. That warmth between us now wasn't fragile, it was stranger than that. Earned enough to survive silence, mature enough not to need constant naming. Still, there were things unsaid. I stood to put the tea things away and felt the room tilt. Just a little. Dante's hand was there before the cup hit the sink. "You need to sit." "I'm fine." That phrase should be outlawed. His arm circled my waist with that same careful authority he used on ledgers and loaded guns. He guided me back to the chair. Knelt to take off my shoes when my ankles showed the first whisper of swelling. "Dante, don't." It wasn't harsh. It was almost weary. I let him. He set my shoes side by side beneath the table as if they belonged somewhere safe. Then he stayed kneeling, one hand on my calf, looking up at me in a way that made my chest hurt. "I don't know how to do this beautifully," he said. I forgot how to breathe for a second. Outside, Nico yelped, probably because Maria had threatened him with a tomato. The ordinary sound made the moment somehow more intimate, not less. "You don't have to," I whispered. His gaze lowered, rose again. "Good. Because I'm not interested in beautiful lies." From his jacket pocket, he took a small black velvet box. I stared at it and then at him, my pulse suddenly everywhere. He didn't open it. "Marry me," he said. Simple, no theatrical drop of the knee. He was already there from taking off my shoes. Not because it repairs anything. It doesn't. Not because I can offer you innocence back. I can't. I'm asking because every plan I make has started including you before I notice, and every version of this house without you feels wrong. The kitchen seemed to go very still around us. I know what I am, he continued, voice quiet and mercilessly honest. I know what raising a child beside me means. Risk, history, blood that doesn't wash out just because we close doors. If you say no, I will still provide for you. I will still protect you. If you say yes, I will spend the rest of my life making sure your fear is never of me. Tears came before any elegant answer. I laughed at myself through them. You say you don't do beautiful, and then you say things like that. That wasn't beauty. His thumb brushed my ankle once. That was accounting. I made a wet, startled sound that might have been a laugh again. Then I said the only true thing I had. Yes, but I'm still afraid sometimes. His face changed on the word yes. Not into happiness exactly, something deeper, more dangerous because it had survived pain first. You should be, he said, just not alone. He opened the box then. The ring was old, not flashy, not a king's ransom dragged onto a hand. A slim band with a square emerald and 2 tiny diamonds. Family, not spectacle. Bianca S., he said before I could ask. She would have liked you. That undid me completely. When he slid it onto my finger, his hand shook once. Only once. Then he looked up at me with all that darkness and all that choice inside him and said, softly now, warmly now, thank you. Little Saint. The nickname settled into me like a home I had not known I was building. From the garden below came Nico's triumphant shout. She made me eat bread and admitted concern. This is courtship. Maria's answer was a thrown tomato and laughter. I leaned into Dante's shoulder and listened to them while the kettle clicked as it cooled on the stove. Nothing in the room was innocent. Everything in it was real. 9 months after the marble hall, I woke to silence. Not empty silence, house silence, the soft kind. Breathing through old walls, a distant car on wet pavement, the radiator ticking under the nursery window. Dawn had not fully arrived. The room was blue at the edges. My son slept in the cradle Teresa insisted was traditional, and Nico insisted looked like a tiny boat for a very judgmental prince. He had Dante's stare when awake, my mouth when furious. And the kind of fists that opened only in sleep. We named him Matteo Carlo Salvetor. That was the unresolved thread I still carried in the softest part of me. Carlo in the middle, truth and debt in one small name. Dante had never asked me to remove it. I had never asked what it cost him to hear. Some loves do not erase what came before. They learn to live beside the ghosts without pretending not to see them. The nursery smelled like warmed milk, clean cotton, and the cedar oil Dante rubbed into the window frame himself when winter came. The baby blanket I had sewn before war was tucked around Matteo's legs, plain cream on top, soft blue hidden underneath, the seams still invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. I heard the bedroom door open down the hall. No footsteps after. That was enough to wake every instinct I had developed in his world. I crossed the corridor barefoot and found Dante sitting on the edge of our bed in the half-dark, elbows on his knees, staring at the far wall as if it had accused him first. Nightmare. He still had them, less often, never announced. They left him quieter in the mornings after. The silver lighter rested in his hand. He wasn't smoking. He never did. Sometimes he only clicked it open and closed because the sound gave structure to thoughts he wouldn't name. Click. The same clean metallic note from the first night I saw him. Only now, in the room we shared, it meant something entirely different. Not danger. Not the sharp edge of a life I had wandered into barefoot and unprepared. Home, somehow. Or the man trying and failing to keep his darkness folded small enough not to wake the people he loved. I went to him without speaking. The floorboards were cold under my feet. The window had a thin line of rain at the glass. When I reached him, he looked up, and I saw the last of the dreams still clinging there, not fear exactly, but the old ruin beneath it. He opened the lighter again. Click. I took it gently from his hand and closed it. The sound was softer in my fingers, Dante watched me do it. His gaze dropped to my wrist, to the thin gold bracelet Teresa had given me after Matteo was born, then rose back to my face. "You should sleep," he said. "So should you. That seems unlikely." I set the lighter on the bedside table and stood between his knees. For a second, neither of us moved. The room held that old habit of almost all the moments we had stopped, swallowed words, reached and withdrawn. Then I touched his face, not to wake him, not to calm him like a child. Just 2 fingers, gentle across his brow, then down to the corner of one eye where the nightmare still lived. The same 2 fingers, the same mercy. His breath changed. In Chapter 1, I had closed a dying man's eyes because no one should have to stare at the ceiling alone. Now Dante sat in our room, alive and scarred and mine in the only way that mattered, and I understood the bookend of it so deeply it hurt. "You're doing it again," he said quietly. I smiled a little. "Doing what?" "That thing." His voice had gone rough at the edges. "Touching the world like it deserves gentleness, even after it's done everything possible to teach you otherwise." There it was. Named at last, not the blood, not the baby, not my face or my body or the accident of me, that. I looked down at him and felt the full distance between the marble hall and this dark blue room with a sleeping child down the corridor. "It still unsettles you?" I asked. His hands came to my waist, warm and certain, drawing me a fraction closer without urgency, without possession, just truth. "No," he said. "Now it ruins me." The words went through me so cleanly I had to laugh to keep from crying. He rested his forehead against my stomach for a moment, just above the soft cotton of my nightgown, where the baby had once turned beneath his hand and terrified him in entirely new ways. Matteo made a small sound down the hall, then settled again. Dante stayed where he was. "Sometimes," I whispered into his hair, "I still think about the name." He knew which one. Of course he did. Carlo, our son sleeping with another man's middle name tucked into the center of his life like a truth we had chosen not to bury. Dante's grip shifted once on my waist, not tightening, enduring. "I know," he said. "I don't know if it was mercy or guilt. Maybe both. That doesn't bother you." He leaned back enough to look at me. There was no easy answer in his face. That was one of the reasons I had stayed. He had stopped trying to make painful things simple. "Yes," he said, "and no." I let out a breath that almost shook. "That's not very helpful." "No," the corner of his mouth moved, "but it's honest." Honest had become our quiet luxury, harder won than jewels. More expensive than the houses, the men, the protected streets. I bent and kissed him, softly, sleepily. The way wives in ordinary lives probably kissed husbands before dawn, without first surviving gunfire and betrayal, and crypts full of family ghosts. When I drew back, he followed just enough to press one more kiss to my wrist, exactly where the rope scars had long since faded. The nursery lamp clicked on down the hall. Nico's voice, muffled by distance and walls, floated up from the kitchen below. "If that child inherits the boss's glare and Maria's temper, we're all finished." Maria answered, laughing. "You say that like it's bad." Teresa, somewhere behind them, said, "Lower your voice, or I'll lower it for you." Dante exhaled what might once have been a laugh into my stomach. The house breathed around us. Rain at the window, warm sheets waiting. Our son asleep under a blanket I had sewn in fear and now used in peace. The silver lighter on the table, closed, same gesture. Different life. I took Dante's hand and led him back to bed. He came without resistance. When he settled beside me, I turned onto my side, and he fit himself behind me with practiced care, one arm curved over my waist. His palm spread warm and protective, where our child had once been hidden from him, in a maid's apron pocket. "Sleep," I murmured. His mouth brushed the back of my shoulder. "Yes, little saint." That was the last time he said it in the dark like a warning. Now it sounded like gratitude, like home. Like the most dangerous man I had ever known had finally found one place where he did not have to keep a hand on the knife. Outside, his world did not become safe because I loved him. Men still carried guns for him, doors still locked heavily at night. There were names we would never speak lightly. graves we would never visit casually, and a middle name in our son's cradle that would always ask something of me I could not fully answer. But in that room, before dawn, with Dante's breathing evening out against my back and the lighter silent on the bedside table, I understood the most radical thing I had ever done was not surviving his world. It was building a life inside it anyway. And if love asks for that much blood before it lets you keep the ordinary, what would you have chosen?